Hello there, Outliers. Niiamah here, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey. I'm excited to jump into today's Outliers Edge Roundtable because we have four extraordinary outliers who are here to share their journey, their stories, and their challenges and successes along as they continue to up-level themselves and create more impact, more income, and more integrity in everything that they do. Why don't we get started here and give you a chance to get to know each of these outliers? Let's start off here with Laurent. Laurent, would you mind giving us let us know about more about you and the game that you're playing?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, Niiamah. The game that I'm playing is a game of making sure that I self-actualize all the potential that I've grew up believing that I had in myself. And as I do that, I want to empower other people to find their ability to do so too in their unique realm, talent, whatever industry they're in, focusing on the realm of communication and community.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. Thank you so much, Laurent. Let's go to Violet, and then we'll go to Kimberly.
Hello there. Thank you for having me. My name is Violet. The game that I'm playing, I like that question. I would say just living in my truest authenticity, encouraging others to do the same, loving where I am, and helping others feel that as well.
Fantastic. Glad that you're here, Violet. Kimberly, then Andrew.
Hi, yes. Kimberly, happy to be here with you all. The game I'm playing, I'd say, is the intersection between creativity and personal growth and how using specifically creativity can help expand personally and also help the community, people when people come together to create, how that can create expansion for communities in general. So yeah, creativity is my jam.
Oh, I love this. I had a friend who got a PhD in creativity, and she said that creativity thrives with constraints. And as outliers,
Mm,
we tend to be like,
mm.
"Hey, what are all the different things we can do?" So I'm actually really excited to play with creativity with you. Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks for being here. And then Andrew.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Easton. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska in the education space and would say that I'd kind of build off of what Laurent said as far as finding that self-actualization piece that I think kind of dovetails a little bit into what Kimberly shared too of I how do I find ways to make sure that I'm showing up as my best self so that I can then be self-aware and healthy to thrive in what spaces and opportunities provide themselves for me to grow professionally. And the game, I guess, in the midst of that would be if those things are aligned, then what you do when that opportunity finds you. And that's been really fun to explore and grow moment to moment over the career that I've had.
No, Andrew, it's as if you're reading my mind because that's like as I'm hearing this here, I get like the baseline that we are all starting from is that authenticity, is that self-actualization and saying like how like essentially how do I continue to create success on whatever my definition of it in a way that's in integrity with me, you know? And so I love that. And I want to invite us into something because I had my like slate of questions that I thought I was going to go down, but then when like authenticity kept showing up and creativity, I'm like, we can go beyond. And Andrew, I think you teased it really well, where it's like, okay, what happens once you're authentic? A lot of times the conversation gets to like you should be, and like, isn't it great if you could be? And then it's like, but what happens when you get there? And so I'm going to start off with you, Andrew. Usually I go in the same order, but like since you got me thinking about this here, I'm going to just go with this question. I'll start with you, and then we'll do reverse order here. Um, all right, I'm going to ask the question that's really on my mind. What when we talk about authenticity and self-actualization, like tell us about like what has been like the biggest cost to you to be able to show up in a way that has been authentic for you, right? Not like how much have you spent financially, but like what it like it seems it's this ideal that we talk about, but I feel like most people don't get that like authenticity that like comes at a price. You know, the reward is really great too, but it also comes at a price. So I'm kind of curious for you, Andrew. And if it doesn't resonate with you, you can be like, no, never had to pay anything, and just let me know. That's good too.
Uh, I don't know if I would frame it as a cost, though. If I were to answer that question for what it is, I would say that it's probably for me, when you live your life in service to other people, it does sometimes put your own wants, needs, things on a back burner for a time until you're able to move them to the front. But if I think if you're playing the long game and you're growing over time and you realize that you're in it for the collective good that you can do over the course of the duration, the more that you're able to step into that space and allow yourself to put others and elevate other work and collaborate with folks and do that first, then yeah, I think that over the long haul there is a benefit to it. But the immediate cost maybe is getting out of your own way.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for playing. Thank you for playing. I'm curious to see. I've never asked this question on here, so I'm curious to see what comes with it. Kimberly, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, the letting vulnerability essentially, like being vulnerable and having to let go of the fear of judgment. Specifically, I'm in a lot of mediums where I have to be very vulnerable to write about pieces or share things or do podcasts or whatever. And so I'm sharing a lot of my personal life, and that comes with a lot of uh, potential judgment. And I think one thing, but also separate from, I think, vulnerability, it's also I have a day job as a creative director, and then I have like my side hustles as a creative and a writer. And I found that I've had to sacrifice the traditional climb that I was kind of, you're taught like this is the way that you access success, and learning that that doesn't have fulfillment for me. My fulfillment is more around creating and building creative communities. And so the goalposts kind of move, and that's the space I'm in right now. And so that's something I feel like I have to sacrifice.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Kimberly, for bringing this in. I'm gonna go to everyone first, and then we're just gonna open it up a little bit more. So, Violet, how about you? What would you find is like the cost of it?
Yeah, I really resonate with what Kimberly said, and I agree. I also write. I have a blog. I have a podcast where I'm constantly sharing very vulnerable pieces of my relationships, of my past, of myself, of my evolution. And with that does come inevitably when you are public, you sacrifice your privacy, right, for the betterment of yourself, but the betterment of others. And so with that comes putting yourself at risk for judgment, as she said. I couldn't have said that better myself. I think that like kind of hit the nail on the head perfectly, where you do expose yourself. You're kind of ripped raw open for the world to see what most would normally hide. So I think that's what I would share. Yeah.
Thank you, Violet. We're gonna play with some of this in a little bit. And Laurent?
Yeah, I definitely want to echo everything everybody said about the vulnerability. And I think for me, just to add something a little different, was I had to let go of the comfort that comes with ego. And I don't think a lot of people would qualify it as comfort until they start to understand how much of what they are doing is in ego. But I didn't kill my ego. I had to make sure that I understood that I had to stop pleasing the ego in order to echo what Andrew said, kind of serve my way to success, the longer way, where focusing on what I was doing was for the people that I wanted to serve rather than at myself serving my own ego.
Can you make that real for us here? Like, give us a one instance of when you had to like navigate that.
Oh man, I've failed at probably 7 different podcasts and YouTube channels, specifically because I was too worried about my reception, my audience, what people were going to think, how vulnerable, how deep I was going to get. And I didn't realize that that's what was making me fail because I'm looking at metrics and numbers and I'm worried about how much of myself I'm sharing. And I can get into a whole spiel about it, but long story short, until I started realizing that most of the problem was that I was scared of letting myself give everything I could to the people that I wanted to speak to. It was difficult for me to fully trust the process that comes with developing these things, whether it's writing a book, starting a podcast, sharing yourself on YouTube, doing an interview series, anything like that.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this here because like the outliers listening to this, like they're also creatives, they're leaders, and they're finding ways to get out into the world, whether it's through whatever medium that they have and to lead others in it. And I want to talk about this. The idea that was planted was what happens afterwards. right? So you all have talked about like the vulnerability that's involved, and yet you're still out there doing it, right? A lot of times I'll have the conversation like, you need to be vulnerable, so then go make your first post. Now you're also saying like, by the way, after that post, it still continues. Like the game still continues. So Violet, I'm drawn to you first on this one here, but and would you mind sharing a little bit here around like how you currently navigate like the vulnerability in showing up as a leader as you continue going? I kind of wanted to see like what's it like to keep stepping up in your leadership and then having to find and play with different levels of authenticity and vulnerability for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think it's just, the fear is always there, right? It doesn't go away. There's always that anxiety. But I think over time, what has kind of shifted a little bit with understanding myself as I'm getting older and I'm developing and I'm changing things, and after becoming a mom and a wife, I do feel that it now is a little more exciting. And that may sound a little crazy, but in the beginning, it was just the most fear invoking, like nauseating feeling. I remember when I first hit post on my first blog, I was like hyperventilating just a little bit because I was so anxious, so nervous, so overwhelmed. Where now it's just easy peasy, never simple, but I will say the fear is now, at least internally, the way I feel is like excitement. It's going to be scary, it's going to be exciting, but you get it out there and then there's that like relief. It's something that I intuitively feel that I have to create, I must create. I'm a creative human being. And with that comes like this sense of release and peace, knowing like, oh, that was good, I got that done, what's next? So that's my response.
That's awesome. I love to open it up for any of you to see like how y'all are navigating. We use the word vulnerability. It might be like the cousin of courage, So but I'm curious about how y'all keep leveling up with this as it goes along. Anyone feel called to add on?
I can.
Yes, please.
I mean, I resonate a lot with what you were saying, Violet. And also what was coming to mind for me is, for me in my life, once I take the jump and that requires a lot of vulnerability, there's usually the path starts lighting up very subtly, like you start getting breadcrumbs, like opportunities start coming in, or you just feel this like soul tug is how I describe it, where I just feel really called to keep going towards this thing and there's a lot of momentum around it. And that's where that excitement comes from too, where you just want to keep going with this creative project, or your mind expands a different way. So I think for me, it's like following that curiosity trail, and as you continue to be open, like life starts serving things up for you in my experience, that's what keeps me.
Kimberly, I love that soul tug phrase. Like that's I feel you in that I've find myself often just trying to say yes as much as I can without sacrificing who I am and who I want to show up as, and what I want to be at home as well. And in doing so, it is really fun to sometimes be in places you never thought you would be. Maybe like a podcast like this, for example, or to be in places that are familiar. But regardless of where you're at, then to get into those spaces as a creative, then you find ways to leverage what you bring to that moment, to that conversation, to that product that you're trying to collaborate on. But you gotta follow where your soul tugs you in the direction of. And so I really think that's an awesome idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was a really nice way to put it, the soul pull. And I want to echo what Violet had mentioned about having to, like, she felt that she needs to do it. I'm going to reiterate the word ego a lot because of how I used to villainize that term so much. But I think when we actualize and we start to really look into our identities, there is that part of us that always questions, what if, what if, what if? Or I believe I this. You have this identity you have for yourself in your head, and you almost have to push yourself into this idea of, I have to share this because I don't want to keep wondering what would happen if I did, or I have to help because I don't want to keep wondering if I didn't. And I think that's where choosing responsibility comes into play, with really helping and serving. And this is where it's a fine dance and a fine line that even I myself have been, wrestling with on my journey. But as I've grown and matured and started getting into my my full stride, I just understood that it really is a matter of like Kimberly said, you'll start to see breadcrumbs when you've actualized yourself. But it's definitely I hear the term a lot in economics and for people in business. How to get rich and how to stay rich are two different things. So
Well, I appreciate you all on this one here. You brought up something right now, Laurent, that got me where it's like I don't want to keep wondering if I did it, you know. And Outlier is here. You're all part of this conversation. So take some time right now for yourself right now and ask yourself, like, what's that thing that you don't want to keep wondering about? Part of the reason why this podcast exists is because I was going through a time where I was struggling with the business and I was like, oh, am I going to have to go in and, get a job and do something else like that? And, I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I've been doing this for a while, but I still haven't done what I came here to do. Like, what, why not? In following what I thought needed to get done, I was creating everything but what it was actually being called. I'm like, if I'm going to go down, I want to at least go down my way, and play out from there. So I'm curious for you all here. I want to play on the sides of both like the light and the dark, right? We're not going to get too like into like, well, you can bring in whatever you want to bring, but the component for me is like share a time where y'all were like something wasn't working well for you in the business for you or the way that you're showing up, and some of the steps that you took to like overcome it in your way. Laurent, you had brought some things up earlier where I found myself being curious about, even like mentioned systems and other things like that. It was a nice little like teaser before we hit record. So do you mind if we start with you?
yeah, no problem. So times where I've had to just to like answer as succinctly as possible. Can you repeat it for me, the question?
Yeah, the question here is just take us to a time where something didn't work out for you and the steps that you took to overcome that.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Hmm. I went through two phases of this, one pre losing my father and one post losing my father. When I lost my father, I had to, I felt like I had lost a North Star. And because I had lost the North Star, I didn't realize how much of my fervor was coming from wanting to show him what I've built. And I realized how much could collapse when I personally was not in my business or when I personally wasn't doing the things necessary to keep things running. I was kind of in a place where obviously I was grieving, but I think beyond that, I realized I was doing something that I wasn't necessarily meant to do. And prior to losing my father, there was a lot of things that I would say that most of the reason I was failing was the lack of systems. So when I conceptualized both levels of the failure, pre-father and post-father, I realized a lot of what caused my failures was a lack of preparation and understanding fundamentals. Because I think what I wanted to do was build a building on, to give you a visual, you have Lego blocks that you stack up. I tried to put them vertically and I kept putting on top of vertically. And eventually the balance is just going to like, instead of actually stacking the Lego blocks. So that way, even if you get pretty tall, you have a firm foundation for them to keep growing onto each other. So, a lot of people like to say business isn't personal. And I don't really agree to that sentiment because, yes, there's a part of business that is numbers, analytics, marketing, and structure, but a lot of it is going to be, are you going to do the things to move the needle forward, no matter how you feel? And how you feel is going to determine how much you put into moving the needle forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Laurent. Anyone have anything that like is growing from them in this area of like, what's really coming to me is not just like failure, like a one-off thing, but like being in that like pit of despair where it's like, and like in the sense of like, hey, things are working out and I'm going through it. I now know more about what it is that I'm doing. It's not working as well as I would love to, but now you're in this place where you have to either like persevere or pivot. Is there any, Kimberly, I saw you a little bit here. Did something come to you around that?
Yeah, what came to mind, especially around the perseverance side, was so I wrote a book and started it 8 years ago. Finally, was putting that to pitch, and it was a long journey of so many rejections, like over 100 rejections of like, no, no, radio silence. And when you put so many years of time into something, a lot of writers can resonate with this, I'm sure. It's like, is this worth pursuing anymore? You're really questioning your quality, like your ability. And so there were moments where I was just like, should I just drop this thing? It was like, I can't. Like, I put so much energy in this. It needs to go somewhere. And so that was where the pivot came in of like, okay, my original vision, like letting go of the original vision. And for me, it was getting real with myself of like, is it ego aligned, which it was, of like, I wanted an agent and I wanted a big publisher. And so I was like going after that one lane, which is so hard to get in, especially for your first book like mine. And so I was like, okay, let's pivot, like small presses. And so then went that route. And that's where I ended up finding success eventually, thankfully. And so for me, being flexible about what success looks like, even if it isn't grand and like everything you thought it was going to be, I mean, I still feel super fulfilled and excited about that, so like keeping going without knowing, but also pivoting.
I love like rhetoric, like keeping going without knowing. Outliers, keep that go, like keep that in mind right there. Keeping going without knowing. That's like a shirt right there. Like I love it. I love it. Andrew, I'm drawn to you. Like anything you want to add to this one? Is there anything you'd like to add to this part of the combo from your side of things around having to be in a place where you either persevere or pivot or like things just weren't working out and what you did from there?
Yeah, I've certainly found myself in those places, and maybe because I'm overly optimistic, I either succeeded or I grew. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I like found myself in exactly the description that we're providing here, but I would say that it feels almost like there in almost every opportunity to grow significantly, there comes a moment where things get really hard. And the challenge increases to a degree where you absolutely have to persevere through that moment. And what has been interesting or reassuring, I guess, is that the more that you step into spaces where you have the opportunity to grow, that you will hit that spot more often and in different contexts and ways. And you can know when you're there, then that's where you're at.
Is there like we can make that real for us? Is there a time that comes to mind for you where this situation took place?
Yeah, the shortest version, I wrote a book as well, and so I'd echo some of the things that Kimberly shared about that first experience going through it. But I even experienced that there's been some state level projects that I've had the opportunity to be a lead on that required the better part of a weekend where you pour 40 hours in to just try to get something over the top so you can share it out. And then all of a sudden that thing takes off and connects you with 15 other people or new conversations. And then when you get into those spaces, you find that there's another big thing that you're really passionate about that you're like, oh my gosh, but this is going to take a lot to get this thing across the finish line. And when you understand that you're there, you can kind of pause, take a deep breath and go, oh, I'm just at that place again. And I know that I can get through this, one, and that two, I'll be glad to have done that on the other side of it. But to just have that healthy moment where you go, but I'm going to recognize right now, it's pretty hard. And that's okay.
Let's just take this in here. I appreciate you all because I started out with like what's the cost of authenticity and being in this space here around like being in like the pivot or persevere. And I like to bring this in here because like I feel like that's the real places that outliers are at. Sometimes things are going really, really well, and other times it's almost like because things have gone so well, when it's not, even just by a little bit, it can feel relatively like how is this working, or it may never work out. And so I appreciate your insights into this overall. Violet, I'm about to go to a different question, but before I do, just let me check in. Is there anything that you want to bring into the space around the questions we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that kind of pops up for me was in terms of like pivoting and what that's felt like for me, it's a little bit different, but the main thing that comes to mind is uh, you know, your personal life absolutely affects your business life. They're intertwined. I think Laurent mentioned something like this a little bit earlier, and it just makes me think of right towards the end of my pregnancy. I lost my brother tragically. I had my baby a couple weeks later, and coaching, all these things that mattered so much a couple weeks before changed with that life, with that big life change. So I think pivoting, taking time for myself, learning to grieve, still trying to understand what grieving is, and pivoting and taking time for myself. And I think through the birth of my son, it kind of inspired me to do the work that I do now. But yeah, I would say that's what came up for me. Yeah.
I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much for like playing the game that you do play, you know, and bringing it out in the way that you do, and just for being in the conversation this way. I get curious now around something that y'all are creating right now. Right, so this is called Outliers Edge, not like average person's middle. And so I like to like lean into that and see a few things. I think I want to ask this in maybe two ways because I usually just focus. I'll ask this question this way. One, and to do a quick roundtable, like this is real fast on this one. But like, in what ways do you consider yourself an outlier? And it's a made up term, so there's no right way. But I'm really, in what ways do you consider yourself an outlier, and what things like how would you put that out into the world as like you being an outlier? And I'm going to ask a follow up question around that. All right, Violet, let's start with you. Then we'll go to Laurent.
Real quick, what comes to mind is I just do what I'm called to. I feel it and I just make it happen however I can. Yeah.
Feel you there,
Yeah.
Laurent.
I think I've always felt like an alien because of my cultural background and how I grew up. And because of that, I use that, like, I never looked at it as an alien that's like ostracized. I'm always like, well, I'm an alien. I think we're all aliens. I'll show you why I'm an alien. So that way you can show me why you're an alien. And then we can all be aliens together.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Like you're not the first person that said that to me here. Um, I appreciate you, Laura. Thank you. Kimberly, then Andrew.
Yeah, maybe not amongst this group, but I feel like in my normal space, like that, usually I'm someone who is very prone to just being very open, a little more on the raw, vulnerable side. And it's very easy for me to go in that space and just like drop in with openness. And sometimes that feels like I'm an outlier in spaces.
Thank you. And Andrew?
I would say I sometimes feel like an outlier because I listen. I find that a strength of mine for my Gallup strengths that helps is ideation. And so the two of those tend to work a little bit hand in hand. And then I am pretty tenacious when I get an idea that I am certainly going to pursue. And so I think it's somewhere in the combination of those three core things that, yeah, I'm able to do some different things as a result
Nice.
of those. Yeah.
Nice. So outliers, like we just got in four different ways that four different people have come up with their own like way of what makes them an outlier. There's no right or wrong, but I want you to think about it for yourself. Like, firstly, I want you to think about like what it felt like to hear it from someone else. Like, well, obviously Violet's an outlier because of what she just said, or Laurent's like one. I want to give you the space to actually like own your outlier as well. In what ways do you show up differently, and what would it be like to actually own that through you? All right. Now, the second question I have here is like, what's a project that you're taking on right now that's still like in the mix, right? Like it's easier to talk about things that we have done, but now I'm kind of curious about us playing on like in the edge of like this is still happening. I'm not necessarily sure how it's going to work out. So why don't you share a project that you're taking on right now and a bit about how your outlier, whether the one that you mentioned right now or not, how you're using that to help make that a success. All right. So what's a project? It might even give you, I like to say like, it's like sweaty palms, my sweaty palms question. Like what's the thing you're taking on that excites you, but at the same time scares you and it gives you kind of sweaty palms, and how are you using your outlier to make that a success? Andrew, did I see you? Do you have something right here that you want to contribute?
Sure. I get a chance to do a number of things through my work, but one of the requests that has come up a lot in education at this moment is what do we do with regards to writing assessment, and AI. And I've had the opportunity to be kind of steeped in both those conversations as a former English teacher myself, and also somebody who's pretty active in the tech space. And so it has been kind of a passion project over the last 2 or 3 months here to bring together 6 state level leaders in our state and to collaborate with folks that I've connected through a myriad of avenues with that are across the country. So 7 folks from outside of Nebraska. And we're putting together a 4-page resource that goes everywhere from what the heck is AI to I thought I could use detectors, but they don't work. No, they really don't when it comes to assessing whether students use AI for their as like to plagiarize essentially. And then additional pages that sort of talk about where that meets the writing process for folks, like how could this maybe help with brainstorming or editing, but not replace the skill. And then we do a whole page on kind of the future of where it might go. And to make it accessible to folks, we put together a series of videos so that teachers could just play that and just listen, because it's a very nuanced conversation. But it's been really fun to put this multimedia piece together that hopefully we'll share out in the next 2.5 weeks or so. But it's been an undertaking and a lot of creativity going into it for sure.
It's not like you got me thinking. I feel like everyone here just had like a moment like, oh, I wonder what is happening at the intersection of writing and AI and education. This is cool. I have another question that's coming to mind, but I'm going to hold off on it for just right now. Kimberly, is there anything coming to you on this question of like, the Sweaty Palms project?
Yeah, it's bigger than a project because I feel like it's my life. It feels like
Yeah.
it's kind of like lifestyle design in the way of I'm actively trying to figure out. And this year I have more, but just I'm not someone who I know my day job is supposed to be my main calling, but we need to make money, like it's being real. So I'm figuring out how to have my writing and my creative efforts take more of my time and get more of a sustainable flow where they're taking up more of the week and also more income. And it's something that is becoming more clear than it has in the past, but it's definitely still a work in progress. And yeah, so it's kind of like going in two angles at the same time, and not sure how each are going, but they're going.
I appreciate it because I'm imagining the outliers who are like, get that. I know this component over here. And part of the reason why we do this and I ask you to share your stories and your experiences is to help us like know that like, hey, we're all in this. We're all in this. And I also think to myself, just, I have like a very long-term vision with each of you. I'm like, oh, I can't wait for 10 years to go by and we go back to this conversation, and we see where we are at that point here. So I appreciate you. Laurent, Violet, anything coming to mind on this?
I can go.
Okay.
I'll share my book. It's been a work in progress, and it's going to continue to be a work in progress for some time. And I'm at peace with that for now because I know it will change little by little. I'm going to continue writing, continue editing, continue adding, my heart and soul into it, and we'll see where that goes. But that's the challenge and the big project that I'm currently working on. Yeah.
It's nice. It's interesting. So, Laurent, I'm going to come to you in just a second, but just before here, we had a space of silence. And I don't edit things. I like to keep things in here because one of my things that I like to there's a lot of different elements to this conversation. But one of them is like, what if something goes wrong? Or like the element of like, I have to keep speaking. There can't be any blank space, in order to create as much value as possible. And what I felt in there was like, as this was going, I was like, you know what? That was my coach that just showed up here where I'm like, I'm good with silence. I wonder how it's going to play back later on, but I want to let you know, Outliers, like it was the space of allowing the space for things to come. And it also like, I was also really curious to see like, how do we show up to like, do we run to it? Do we not? And so I appreciate all of you. And I want to make sure I address that intentionally because there's many different things happening in the span of this conversation. Laurent, thank you for a little bit more space to bring that to light here. Curious what you're thinking right now.
Yeah, and quickly, just I appreciate the way you structure these things because I'm somebody who likes to speak, so I like being able to speak in structure, and it kind of goes into my answer for the question. I have a macro and micro project that I'll answer concisely for you, but my macro is my nonprofit called Bridge the Gap DRC, in which we're trying to connect the Black American and the American minority with understanding better the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, through social media content. So that way, Africa is no longer just looked at as a monolith, but they can understand, things as simple as everyone who has an iPhone or a smartphone, where is that supply coming from? coming from Congo. Things like that are what our project is all about. And that's on a macro scale because I think that that project, Bridge the Gap in general, can branch out to Bridge the Gap Asia, Bridge the Gap India, Bridge the Gap South America. There's so many different ways to emphasize bridging the gap. But the micro project that I'm on right now is, I think it was Kimberly who had brought it up about how creativity works better in systems and with discipline. And right now I'm using my personal YouTube channel to focus on teaching more entrepreneurs and creatives how to really get discipline and create that structure for themselves. Because I'm noticing how this project started 2 years ago, but just started getting its footing going because I started implementing these disciplines, these systems, and these frameworks. So that way it's not just haphazard. I want to do this. I know I can do this. One day I'm going to do this. And then I'm eventually on Time Magazine. You know, all of that is well and good, but like take the first step forward, you know? Like a lot of people like to a lot of people want the six pack. Actually, that's the line I'm going to use. A lot of people like the view, not the climb. I'll leave it at that.
I love that. I love that. All right, so I realize that I want to play this game a little bit differently, and Kimberly, I'm drawn to you right now. What's a question? What's something that you're curious about that you would love to like get like the thoughts of the other people on this in this space? What's a question that you would like for us to play with?
Hmm. I think maybe when you're in times where, when you're in a time where you are at the precipice of the unknown, where you know you're going to have to make a move towards a new direction, how do you kind of prepare yourself mentally to go forward, knowing like you don't really know which way to go?
Let's play with that. Let's play with that one here. Um, it's open, so if you're feeling called to it, like let's bring it in. If you have any, like if you want to clarify, we can go and clarify. Kimberly, I'm glad you brought it in. Overall, is anyone feeling called to answer first?
I actually read a book recently that has helped me a lot with that specific question. And it's called The Power of Now. Now, I know a lot of people have different feelings on self-help books, and you're going to take what you want from these types of books. But I think what I took from it is, and I read another book in tandem is called The Courage to Be Disliked. And both of those books have really given me insight on not overthinking and just focusing on giving, serving, and moving forward. So a lot of times, for example, you have an interview coming up, a job opportunity coming up, just something's going on, and you have all these potential thoughts in your head. And in the reality, it's like, first of all, let's figure out what's happening in the next 20 minutes. Like we need to really learn how to be present in the moments that we're in right now because tomorrow's not promised and yesterday's already done. And I think it's easy to say those things, but it's harder to practice those things, especially when it's for good reasons. Because for bad reasons, you know, we're already always going to overthink negatively, but it's kind of easier to know you shouldn't negatively overthink. Sometimes it's hard to realize, like, yes, be optimistic, but also focus on your present moment and understand you can only control your controllables. So don't really overthink the things that are out of your control. Just be prepared. Because when you're prepared, you don't got to get prepared.
I might say, I think that it is important to make sure that you take care of yourself. So the wellness piece, right? To show up. And I get that sometimes those can be conflicting. I'm like, hey, put 40 hours in over a weekend, but also get time to sleep, get to the gym. Those like I get so as best you can in those moments. I do my best at least to try to remain true to the things that help me to stay in a good headspace. But then I also think that when you have a project or something like you're talking about these crossroads in decision making, at that time, I'm staying up at night sometimes thinking about things, or there's a lens that I sort of am applying to everything I'm filtering at that time in life. And it's helpful to, like Laurent said, go read something else, talk to someone else, spend time. You know, Violet has done a nice job too, talking about that kind of beautiful reciprocity between life and work. And I sometimes find I have to get out of the situation where I'm so steeped in the thing that I'm thinking about. And I'll carry that lens with me, and it's something in that other space. Oftentimes, the right message that I need or I'm looking for will find me. Um, if I just show up elsewhere for a little bit before I go back to it.
Awesome. Violet, anything for you? And then Kimberly, if you want, you can answer your own question.
I like what Andrew said about, the self-care, getting away from it all and then coming back to just revisit it and seeing how you kind of sit and you feel about things. One idea that popped up, I don't know if you guys know Marie Forleo, but she talks about expansion versus contraction, so that when there's a choice to be made or it's something difficult or it's weighing on us, if you feel, and I do feel that this is easier said than done, if you feel that this decision is contracting you physically, it's probably not the best thing. But if it's expansive and it feels open and airy and you're physically drawn to it, then it might be more of something that you want to follow through and look into and dedicate more time to, or push through and decide on. So that's what comes up.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I feel like that's like the main way I try and make decisions is from a somatic place. But yeah, I think if I were to answer my own question, thank you for flipping that back. Like, I think for me, it goes, soul tugs are a common thing for me. So I kind of just am listening more from, notice for little signs or little tugs from within. And I think that expansion and contraction thing comes back to that of just where is the nudge being drawn towards. And then, yeah, when I step in that direction, do I feel lit up or what happens? So I think I'll.
So y'all may not know this, but every once in a while I like to test the mute function. This was not me being really, really wonderful with my silence. Like I wasn't like just being super zen. This was just me like not pushing the right button here. So Kimberly, what I want to say is just thanks for bringing the question in. I'm going to reveal something to you, and I actually want to get your thoughts on it. So like this is me like showing up here. Um, One of the challenges that happens, and then after this question, we're gonna like wrap things up. But I'm asking y'all for help in a sense. One of the challenges that happens that I'll come into these conversations and we talk about creativity, and I realize that there's like there's this bar in my mind of like the conversation, like I should be being more creative. The conversation should be going in a different direction. There should be whiz bangs, and people should be comparing this to Saturday Night Live. That's what I compare it to. I'm like, how do I make this Saturday Night Live of a podcast panel, like those kinds of things. And so I'm curious here because we've talked about creativity, I realize that there's a part of me that um, judges myself as like thinking that I'm creative, but not a creative, and I'm just really curious for anyone that's for me, and I know that'll be on behalf of other outliers as well. How do y'all like navigate with the line between like this is what I'm bringing to the world, regardless of what other people may be. There's just something in my mind where I'm like, I'm missing something. I should be getting something, and I'm like, I think if I was like people, I think I'm creating my own art. I just don't know it, and I like rather than being able to see my art, I'm still striving for something where I've already passed the finish line. So I'm really curious, like if y'all have any thoughts on that. I want to be real with y'all because I realized it was kept showing up in this conversation, and I trust y'all. Any thoughts on that? We'll make this our last big one, and then we'll wrap up with and conclude for today.
I can start. What
Yeah.
comes to mind for me is, I mean, we hear this a lot, but I feel like it's really true. There's no one who can replicate what you're bringing to any given moment, any given project and angle, like your experience with your personality, your style, how you're choosing to go about this, whether it's, a writing project or a podcast or a conversation or something at work. I really think that each person has something that can be turned into a creative output if they want it packageable, but also just how we go about thinking and approaching things, like the creative thinking that you bring to a conversation or help someone problem solve, or it can't be replicated. And so I think there really is space for everyone to share, and there's truly value in it. I see it all the time, people of all different levels, and yeah, there really is. So okay.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind immediately when I hear that, because I too have wrestled with that, and I think we will wrestle with that for the rest of our lives, is Sonder, and that's the idea that everybody has their own unique experience in life, no matter what, how genetically similar we are, or you grew up next to somebody for 50 years. There's still differences and unique experiences that we all bring to the table because of our own each individual experience. And I think once we accept that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, that's where you get Mona Lisas. So I feel like even just like going through this conversation, I don't know if you or anybody on this phone call said anything groundbreaking, but I think how we said it, the experiences we brought to the table, the perspectives we brought to the table, and the amalgamation of all of those things is what creates the art. And I think that's what resonates with people because you can show somebody art and there's no unanimous art that everybody in the world is like, this is beautiful until groupthink starts to take effect. But even that, you're always going to have those outliers. They're like, oh, no, I don't like it because they like it. So I think in general, art is subjective. And I think you're creating just by you're creating art and you're creative in itself just by creating in general.
I appreciate y'all.
Uh,
Andrew, I see you just unmuted, please.
yeah, I would really echo pretty much everything that Kimberly said. I thought that was really resonated with me. And maybe it's less about thinking about what I am, but more about what I could be in service to other people. And also in thinking about how I want to show up for what I know. And this is a little bit, I think, what Laurent was saying. Um, Showing up how I would want to be able to show up in those spaces in my own unique way. And I think kind of if I'm aligned with those two, then it doesn't seem as necessary or scary to be anything other than that.
I agree with what everyone said. I really do echo that as well. It's we're all our own individual, perfect human being, imperfectly perfect human being with our own history. And like you said, we have siblings that could be night and day from who we are and what our values are and how we show up in the world and how we create in the world. And so I think that's our own magic power that we have, is that we're our own selves and we have to just embrace that. And I do agree that the comparison will follow us for the rest of our lives because it's there, it's in your face, it's everywhere you go. But I think it's just tuning in, getting quiet, listening to who you are, what's important to you, and doing more of that leads to your own individual greatness. Yeah.
Well, I got to thank all of you. We're going to start wrapping up the conversation, but it isn't lost on me as I'm hearing and receiving. I'm also like in my own head, right? And like I was like, wow, like how appropriate is it that like we had a conversation and I was like, tell me about what it's like to continue being vulnerable, to continue being in the creation of things and still do it. And y'all like evoke this from me right now, So I want to say thank you. And one of my things I like to live it in real time. Outliers, you just heard an incredible conversation, and my invitation to you right now is to think of one person in your life who would really benefit from this. Please go share this on your socials and your emails and let your network know about it. But then we also have the one person at a time initiative where we ask, like, just find one person in your life who would benefit from being a part of this conversation too. There's something about this that I think is like even more powerful than just like shouting it out into the world, and just letting one person know, like, hey, I was thinking of you, and there's a person, it's Violet, Laurent, Andrew, Kimberly, the way that the conversation happened, I think this would be really magical for you. So my ask is that you go and you share it with that one person. And if you're the person who was introduced to this, go share it with someone else. Because I really do think like it could be just that simple. So we're gonna wrap up our conversation here and the way that we do it. Uh Kimberly, I see that right now. Like the sun is like it's like coming for you. You're not watching this on video. It's funny to see how like the sun is changing where it's landing. What we're gonna do is that we're going to end our conversation by letting outliers know how they can continue down with you. All right. Please let us know like how we can deepen the journey with you. And then I also add in there that an insight that you got from today's conversation. So the outliers have gotten what they need to get from this conversation. They're covered. They're still working through things. What's something for you? How did you grow through this? And if there's nothing you're taking away from this, you can just tell us. That's fine. But if you can share with us how outliers can continue down the journey with you and an insight that you got from this conversation, we'll use that to wrap up for today. We'll go with Laurent, then Violet.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to find me is going to be on my socials. Don't get confused when you get on my socials and you see me smiling and dancing and a lot of kind of stuff like that. But the best way to find me is at Apex Laurent, and that's going to be TikTok, that's going to be Instagram, that's also going to be me on YouTube. That's APEXLAURENT. And you'll find me on there sharing my wisdom, and you can follow my Bridge the Gap if you want to learn more about the Democratic Republic of the Congo at Bridge the Gap DRC, or learn more about my nonprofit at MundelaFoundation.org. That's MUNDELA Foundation.org. Now, let's take the takeaway that I got. To be succinct, I love this conversation. I love your platform. I love everything that you're doing here. And it was a reminder of how many different faces and experiences and journeys are sharing the journey of perseverance, self-actualization, and the internal battles that come with all of those things too. And I think being able to share it and, be privileged enough to, you know, to me, I'm listening to giants right now, and to have a seat at the table and be welcomed to have a seat at the table and be looked at as my own giant is something that deeply resonates with me and reminds me to continue forward on my journey. I don't know who recommended me or how you found me. And honestly, I don't think I want to. I think I more just want to keep sharing, and I'm just appreciative of the opportunity for it and everything that Kimberly, Violet, and Andrew had shared, as well as yourself. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurent. I appreciate you. Let's go to Andrew, and then we'll go to Kimberly.
Uh, yeah, I would first want to make sure that I say thank you for the opportunity to be on the show, and then folks can continue to stay connected. I'm honestly not too steeped in social media stuff, though I have some things out there. But my work is with the ESU Coordinating Council in Nebraska, and one of the things that I get the good fortune to do is host podcasts through there called the Good Life EDU podcast, where we talk all things education. And it has been really fun to just lift up great stories and give space for some of the positive things that are going on in education to reach others, and to really just draw attention to that. And so I would hope that folks would get the opportunity to learn, whether it's about AI or school safety or the latest literacy initiatives, through our podcast. And to speak to what I've appreciated most about this opportunity, when you get together with people and you slow down enough to pick your head up and kind of reflect on chapters or your story as a whole, and then share that. And when the moments that resonate, right? Like when whether it was Violet or Kimberly or Laurent shared something and you go, oh, me too. That makes so much sense. And it's just affirming, which does sort of echo what Laurent was saying, that I just think that that's really important. And so thank you, Niiamah, for making space for that.
Thank you for being here with it. So Kimberly and then Violet. Appreciate you all.
Yeah, so you can learn more about me at kimberly-gomes.com. That's Gomes with an S. And there's where I house my online community, which is connected through my Substack. So every month I send out subscribers writing prompts or creativity prompts to get them creating more in their own lives, and then also personal essays or poetry, and members only podcasts kind of things. So that's the main way right now. And then also on my social media, right on WRITE on _Kim. And I post a lot of my poetry there. This was very enriching. So just thank you for having me on. And it was really nice having a roundtable conversation where everyone really brought a different perspective to the same question. And I was over here taking notes. So I'm leaving with a lot of inspiration and motivation in my own way, just from all of you. So I really appreciate everything you shared. And it's really nice to see how everyone really does bring different perspectives that can, you never know when you need encouragement, So this was helpful on my end.
Thanks for being here, Kimberly. Thank you for bringing it as well. And then Violet, why don't you wrap us all up for today?
Great. First of all, thank you for this, beautiful experience and great conversation. I feel like I'm leaving with a couple new buddies and friends from this conversation. So thank you for the space and creating this podcast. And the way you can connect and find me is at Violet_Ventures or my website, ventureviolet.com. And yeah, this was just a really great opportunity. So I would say like my biggest takeaway is just continue to do what I'm called to do, continue to say yes to opportunities like this. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. And Outliers, like I wanted to say on behalf of all Outliers, thank you for making the time for this. Thank you for sharing your experiences here. And Outliers, remember this until the next time we talk. Be you on purpose. Journey on.